Hold
Uh, uh,
Go ahead. I'm good.
I see now. Welcome everybody. Um, my name is Joshua Detmond. I'm national coordinator with Cooperation Jackson, and um, I am, um, dare I say, delighted to be in such good company with some very solid comrades. Um, to have a conversation in a very um, rather distressing moment for what most feel is a distressing moment for the nation. And so we are joined by, as I stated, comrades, friends, and various movement folk who are sharing sentiments this afternoon around yesterday's actions on the nation's capital, and really having a discussion of what the implications of these actions are in regard to into the in regard to the preservation of the United States as an empire, as in regards to the preservation of extractive and the evil form of capitalism that folks feel is our only alternative in this nation as a form of economy, and just to get people's sentiments on what are our next steps now that there is a clear division in this country, and so we're joined by like various activists and various movement folk who have been on the front lines of movement across decades of struggle, um, and very much so a part of very prolific movements um, of the past year as we've been struggling across COVID-19 and racial unrest across this nation. So I'm joined by folk. Um, I will allow people to introduce themselves. Kali, I feel as if Ananda is checking in the backstage or in the green room. So yeah, we'll just go around. This conversation is scheduled for just an hour because I know folks have several things to do. Um, just various work. So just we'll start with Rosa, and we'll allow folks to introduce themselves. Just a side note, knowing that like those here represent various organizations and a multitude of organizations at one time. We don't have to share our organizational capacities. Just more so a set of movement individuals. If you want to share where you're from and what you're doing, by all means, we are welcome to do that. But yeah, no pressure of trying to get any organizational endorsements on this conversation today. But we are delighted to be joined by some really serious thinkers of movement, and yeah, we'll go with Rosa now.
Can y'all hear me? Okay, just double checking. Hi, everybody. My name is Rosa Clemente. I am a independent journalist, scholar, activist, organizer, and freedom fighter. Trying to be a better one.
Thanks, Rosa. We'll pass it down to Ananda.
Hi, folks. Thanks for having me. Like Rosa, I'm consider myself a freedom fighter, and I've had the privilege of working with both Kali and Joshua in both environmental justice spaces, but also in spaces that involve the discourse between labor and community movements in recent years. Check.
Cool. Chanel said that her sound was a bit low. She's gonna check back in. So we'll move to you, Kali.
Yeah, Kali Akuno. Um, I mean, I would echo the same pieces around trying to be working towards becoming a revolutionary, because you need a revolution to help participate in creating one to kind of earn that accolade. And we ain't there yet. We're trying, but we got a ways to go. And we need to speed it up, as I think some of the events from yesterday clearly indicated.
Indeed. Indeed. So when Chanel hops back in, we'll let her introduce herself. And again, I'm Joshua Dedmond. I'm here in Jackson, Mississippi, and I also share the sentiment of we are building a revolution, more so than actually, at that point. But I do think that there are some sentiments on yesterday that provides some clarity for people, and just want to sort through those implications and those dimensions of where we are, and where the unrest is in this nation. So Chanel, we see you hop back on. Always, doing something, working hard. Please, let us know who you are and where you're from.
Thank you. Can y'all hear me?
Yeah, we hear you good.
Okay, good. My sound was messed up a little bit. Hey, everybody. Chanel Helm in Louisville, Kentucky. A strategic core organizer with my folks in the South and in Kentucky. I'm excited for this. I see everybody on.
Thanks, Chanel. So again, this is an informal conversation. Nothing too ridden with jargon. Of course, hoping for some revolutionary discipline and some clarity to come out of this conversation. But this is definitely in response to where we were and what was felt, seen, heard, and understood in the actions of uh, I would consider a last ditch, um, not sporadic, but very, very, wild action that resulted in a storming of the nation's capital in DC that resulted in a load of unrest and the threat of lives on in various factions, but also resulted in the loss of life of folks who participated in this action to storm the nation's capital, which is undergirded by a great sense of preserving white supremacy, and preserving the dimensions of white power as being the dominant faction of force in this society. I think that this was that type of panic and attack. I have a sentiment of white supremacy ain't going nowhere, so white folks could have stayed their behind at home. But I think that there is a larger concept that there is a threat to white supremacy. So, with the result of those actions to preserve white supremacy by thinking that the removal of Donald Trump is a threat to white supremacy, and folks felt that they needed to go and threaten democracy further, the small fabrics of democracy that this nation has. I would like to, just get everyone's sentiment. Um, just go around getting people's sentiment and understanding of what this moment is and what this moment means. And so, we'll start with you, Kali.
All right. Well, I'll try to be brief and concise. It was, from a military perspective, it was a fiasco. I think people need to look at it and understand it, on that basis. They didn't have the numbers to overwhelm the capital and shift the dynamics in the way that was planned. Now, was that the concerted plan? There's some dispute about that. I personally think that they were more looking to use this as a build-up, for the 20th, rather than trying to execute things of that nature for yesterday. But either way, they didn't have the numbers, and I think it was very clear to Trump and his handlers and enablers after he kind of gave his speech that unless there was going to be a larger crowd that showed up, that they were going to be very limited in what they could actually do. And so I think in that sense, it was a failed push, from the jump. But it's one that I think we need to be mindful of and let history be illustrative of, and that it had, for folks who know your German history, you want to look it up, during the quote unquote interwar period, the beer hall push that Hitler tried to execute, which failed. This had many of the makings of that. And I cite that because even though it failed, obviously Hitler learned from that, and the forces around him learned from that and was able to pull it off much more successfully within the course of the next decade, from both learning but also amassing new forces and creating some new terms. And I'm saying that because even though this initial action failed, I think it was actually a kickstart to the beginning of kind of the more open confrontation aspects of the Second Civil War in this country. So it was a beginning, not a close, I think, as many want to see it, but actually a beginning. And I think we need to be mindful of that and be concerned about that on a deep level, because one thing you said, Jess, I would correct. I don't think anything was a threat to white supremacy. I mean, the neoliberals and the neo-confederates are both different stripes of the same tiger, basically. Just one chooses to bear his fangs to deal with forces in his own den, and not just the prey that's outside. So that was kind of more on display yesterday. But Team Trump and Team Biden, best believe, are in the background negotiating right now how to resolve this, peacefully, and do the limited amount of damage, because they are about, Team Biden in particular, the Democrats, their main aim and objective is preserving the empire at all costs. And so they're going to bend over backwards to do some efforts to reconciliate folks and kind of bring them back into the fold. So yesterday basically cemented that their first initiatives are going to bend extremely to the right. That was, if Trump accomplished anything yesterday, he accomplished that they're going to have to bend in that direction to placate the forces who were out there. And any notion that folks had that they were going to bend Biden and his team and his administration to the left, if that call with the NAACP and the black leaders didn't tell you that wasn't going to happen in the beginning, best believe yesterday shut the door on that. So a lot more to say, but I'll in the interest of time, I'll open it up to who you want to call on next.
Let's Chanel, you've being in Louisville have dealt with daily these extreme conservative forces and things like that. So definitely want to try get your take on the actions of yesterday.
I definitely agree with everything Kelly was saying. The number one thing was they said what they was going to do. This group of extremists, they said exactly what they was going to do. That shouldn't have been a surprise to folks. And I think for calling out the neoliberals, but even some of those folks that have joined us in the streets this year to like really not so much wake up. It's just let's get really familiarized with what type of white supremacy we're looking at. nowadays. We are not looking at their grandfather's white supremacy. They showed us yesterday. I do call the coup. I've been calling it all type of stuff. I do call the coup very much corny because it was trying to exhibit an amount of power that they're not used to, and that we also aren't really ready to tolerate just as of yet. It's a huge distraction away from what they were exactly trying to do a few years ago, and we saw that weaken by choosing the wrong candidate. They know that Trump was the one to say what they wanted to say, but in actually execution, that just didn't take place. And I think when we look at the puppet masters of this nation, we're looking at how their power is also diminishing. So I did find yesterday quite entertaining, but I also was looking at the facts too of their narrative. If we want to like turn the hands back on America, I think they kind of completed that with the way that they held the protest in the same way that they held the protest of the inception of this nation. Um, what also was very, I think, on par with the narrative too was what so-called anti-racist white folks were going to do about it. Absolutely the same thing they've been doing all this time, nothing. And so trying to build a narrative about who they are and what they're doing and what we're seeing is really falling on all type of deaf ears because the same way we see them with Blue Lives Matter flags and Protect the Blue Line, also fighting them, shooting at them, and those things is the same way we see that. All of that is white supremacy. It opens up a new definition for them. I don't think that's something new that we know, but I do think it's a part of education we need to practice. That's my major bit of concern is for us. Are we willing to see exactly what we're looking at with a full-on vision set of who these people are and what white supremacy is? It's not just white privilege to go storm the Capitol. That was exactly white supremacy.
You're on mute, Josh.
Yeah. Grateful for that offer, Chanel, and the distinction of saying that it was not just white privilege; it was the action of white supremacy. So I wanna pass it over to Ananda and then Rosa to just kind of close out these sentiments, and then have a few further questions for the entire panel.
Can I actually request our sister Rosa to go ahead of me? Just I'm still trying to assemble some of my thoughts with my morning coffee.
Most definitely.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't slept. I've been processing it. I mean, the first person I was like, Kali, like, tell me, you know. But let me start first by really loving and bigging up Chanel and the work that she has done since Breonna Taylor was murdered, the work that she has done before. I've been to Louisville a lot of times to speak in different capacities. And, I just want her to know that we all see you and recognize the work, because Louisville had been moving pretty progressively with their peoples, especially around homelessness and access to just a better life for Black and brown folks down there, so, and I'm glad to see you, sis, today. So I think one thing we have to be very clear on, and it doesn't need a commission or a report or an investigation, is that the Capitol Police and every law enforcement, all the alphabet boys, DEA, ATFs, look at all the forces that killed Breonna Taylor. Those people were let into the Capitol. You cannot go into the Capitol with a hairbrush. You're going to try to make us believe that 100 people just showed up? Nah, man. Doors were opened for them by their fellow white nationalists in uniforms, whether the National Guard or the ATF or the Capitol Police. We have to be clear, because now they're already talking about passing a domestic terrorist law, right? Which is going to impact, as it always does, Black and brown community. I actually think that this was not just a run-up for 2020. I mean, for the inauguration. Yes, this is a run-up about how they're starting to target and kill us as Black and brown people. The seething anger of them losing Georgia hasn't really seeped in yet. And then you look at the number of people that were there, very large crowd. But how many times has there been 40 or 50 of us and there's 120 cops? You know, like when we were protesting in Albany, New York, there were 30 people. I counted 49 police officers, and they had called in officers from the surrounding area for 30 people that were basically already, quote, penned in. So I think that's very important right now that we say that, because we've been saying it and we know no way they got up in there. Not only did they know, they're now finding pipe bombs all over DC. You finding pipe bombs? Like, y'all knew this was going to happen. Second, if we don't shift right now our movement strategy away from electoral politics, this is what's going to continue to happen. I don't care what people think that Biden and Harris are going to be able to do. There's obviously people embedded in all levels of government that who knows what they're going to do to Biden and Harris. But this now over-reliance on voting more white men, more men in, more older people in to save us is a fallacy, and it's a joke. To have to see these Republicans yesterday even double down at 1 a.m. in the morning, I was like, when is the Cory Booker or the Kamala Harris just going to stand up and be like, F y'all, like remove you, censure right now? They're out here still talking about the election was stolen. All of that said, we now have to, like, because of the global pandemic, we have to hunker down in our communities. We have to be about self-defense, finding food in a farm or a farm that we could support in our area. And we better do some massive self-defense and political education for our young people. You know, and I'll end on this point. We all have children, or we have children in our lives. And my daughter just turned 16. She's like a global well, she starts with Puerto Rico, of course, because, and actually I was telling Kali yesterday, Puerto Rico is a very good example of to look at what Kali talked about yesterday in our interview about these austerity measures that are about to go down. But then when people have enough, how the people can rise up and then come together around mutual aid, self-defense, and self-determination. Right. She's like, Puerto Rico's having earthquakes. The climate is crumbling. We're in a global pandemic, and white supremacists are out here trying to kill us. She's like, what are y'all doing? Where are the adults? And she kind of asked her rhetorically because she's clear. But come on, our kids are traumatized. They already been traumatized from years of police killings, of the climate, virtual school, every mental health, all of this. And, you know, for me, it does begin with truth telling. It begins with right now drawing a real line in the sand for me. If you in any way think that we can ever work within this electoral failure of the electoral political project, or you're even telling me to have a conversation with these 75 million people, I'm going to the left and you can stay in your center and moderate and see how that works out for you. And I encourage everyone to start rereading Black Reconstruction by Du Bois, because he told us exactly where we were going to be. And Kali, I asked Kali yesterday, what if these white folks had the consciousness to understand that this is a capitalistic endeavor that they're trying to save? They're not trying to save anything but the engine of capitalism going. And that also, what happened yesterday affects people around the world, because we are an American imperialist government that forces our will around the world and then questions how this could happen here. All you political pundits and multimillionaire Black pundits crying on TV last night, yo, I'm over it, and we all need to be over it and figure out a way how we're going to create mutual aid and cooperation within ourselves.
Rosa, thank you for that. That was not only fiery and timely. You raised so many things that I really want us to kind of get at in our next 30 minutes. But we had another brother come in, and then I want to go over to Ananda. Brother Chaunchy Spears, a good Jacksonian by way of Memphis, who's come down to do some good work. And so I just definitely want to give time for him to introduce himself, and then we'll move over to Ananda.
Just quickly, I amazingly want to just listen to the information being shared. I just, like everyone else, I'm trying to process what happened yesterday in terms of what we can do locally to empower and liberate our people, educate our young people, and prepare ourselves to take advantage of any opportunities we have for flourishing and fulfillment. Like Brother the Reverend Dr. Joshua Edmonds said, I'm Chaunchy Spears. I am a citizen of Jackson, Mississippi, born and raised in Memphis, Tennessee. I came here to work specifically in the realm of education, public education, specifically trying to enhance opportunities for the most good of most of our children here in the city and the state of Jackson. I primarily come today as a representative of the Alpha Phi Fraternity Incorporated here in Jackson, Mississippi. We were actually in a process of planning a community forum on Martin Luther King's birthday, Martin Luther King's holiday, January 18th. That's going to be about community policing. But yesterday's events really have caused us to take a little bit of pause right quick and try to see if there's a way that we can incorporate the idea of how white supremacy has entrenched itself in the fabric of this nation, and especially concerning policing. One of the things that we saw yesterday was a failure of policing in a major way in terms of doing its job to create what they call law and order. And I understand that the local police here may not identify with the police in the U.S. Capitol, but some of the same challenges that we saw yesterday would occur here at any moment. So I'm kind of wanting to get some insights from you all about how community policing was failed, or community policing can work to help us in our community to better create more safe environments for our children and for our people, and at the same time understand how policing played into the events that took place yesterday. Thank you for allowing me in on this great and robust conversation.
Well, I just want to thank all the brilliance and clear critical thinking on this call, because it's so refreshing. Let me tell you, I sometimes, by spending too much time on social media, I sometimes am dismayed by the lack of critical thinking that even in the left that we sometimes see in reaction to these moments. And so I really appreciate what Kali, Chanel, and Rosa laid out, because I agree wholeheartedly with that analysis. And the fact that actually a term that the last time I was visiting our comrades of Co-op Jackson in Jackson, I heard the term cops and clan walk hand in hand, and that stuck with me ever since. And the fact that this was complicity. This was not just complicity. I think we got played here. There's a sense that what was being said about the design of yesterday's shenanigans was really because it wasn't the force. There was clearly no strategy, but there was the optics of this breach of democracy, when in fact it was the collusion that was enabling something else. And now with an emergency and a curfew being declared on all other forms of political dissent, it makes me question, like, hey, did we just get played? Like the possibility of storming the Capitol for a real movement, for a real revolutionary movement, did that just get further, enclosed by, the corporate elite who are behind all this? Now, that said, I really appreciate, Rosa, you bringing up some of the forward thinking of how we need to pivot, because that's been really one, like, in addition to the long range game of building community defense capacity, training up our young ones. I've just spent a few hours last night with some of our young Coast Salish indigenous folks here blocking a pipeline, and they're getting picked up by the cops. And none of it, of course, is getting picked up by the local media, because it was all about the Beltway. And I in this moment, I wonder, in addition to the long range, what is the need? Just the three explanations I just heard need in my view need to be shared even amongst the movement, like in terms of opening the doors to some of the critical questions we need to ask, of how we got played, for example, with this incident, but then what is the greater design? How is the Beltway Fortress being currently closed down? And and again, with this misleading notion that that's where a political change can even happen. But how do we need to shift the focus as we enter this year of our broader movement, of our broader formations, to really look at where is a critical need for community self-defense, some of the resilience of some of the survival skills we need to be teaching our young ones, and then also some of the critical political analysis that actually connects us back to history. Like I've been saying, well, let's look at how this is really a classic example of the chickens coming home to roost after a century of military coups and insurrections around the world, as was referred to. And really, it's no surprise that just the way it played out, that the collusion was designed to stifle all other forms of political dissent. So, but I'm curious to. I think challenging the dominant culture narrative is something that we need to do a better job of, and really kind of pulling away the veneer of that neoliberalism is trying to cast, doing their good cop, bad cop, whatever they're doing, but they just their idea that they could somehow hoodwink folks into believing that, I don't know, there's some good forms of white supremacist, fascist rule that people need to settle for. Check.
Can I just touch really quickly on something that Brother Spears said? So, and Chanel, you were already on it. See, we don't need the police anymore. They don't do anything in our community to protect us. They don't, which now requires us to have a greater imagination of what it looks like and what safety looks like. There's something I really like, that movement for Black Lives. People say, who keeps us safe? We keep us safe. So it's moments like in this crisis where we can have a greater imagination. And I say this as someone who, I recently moved back to Albany, New York, but I was in college here and I became politicized here. But in 2000, the Amadou Diallo trial was moved to Albany, New York. And we immediately were organizing. I was part of creating this first civilian complaint review board, and it got created in 2000. I got here in 2016. Within 3 weeks, my husband was stopped twice, and the third time I was in the car with him. And I said to the officer, I said, it's all right, I'm going to go to precinct tomorrow and fill out a civilian complaint review thing. And he's like, you don't know nothing about that? I was like, well, actually, I do, and I went there and I filled it out. And then I asked one of the lawyers around here, in the 20 years, how many complaints have been filed? He said 287. How many police officers have been fired? He said none. 20 years. So we've done the community policing. We've done the civilian complaint review board. The movement for Ferguson went from demanding freedom to then people using it to get body cameras. And what did they do with Breonna Taylor and everything? Oh, it didn't work. Oh, we hit it. And lastly, I would say, Brother Spears, too, that it's not a lot of these things that are happening in certain communities, like in Rochester, New York. Rochester is run by all Black people. And they murdered a brother in 20-degree weather and put a spit cover over his face while he was naked. The Black mayor knew, the Black police chief, the Black DA, and the Latina woman human rights commissioner. And those cops are all still on the beat. So I think this is a time that we can really, that's another line. We're already saying defund the police. Now we got to go to abolishing it all. It's got to go. It's got to go. And we'll figure it out. We're still here. We're not going nowhere. So now it requires us to have a greater radical imagination over what safety looks like in our communities.
Yeah. Thanks, Rosa. Thanks for that response and expanding what I sense is you know a culmination of thoughts and processes to not just defund but abolish police, in also abolishing prison systems and abolishing those mechanisms of capitalism to control and give the state power over our bodies. What I do want to make mention to Kali is Anthony Rogers Wright is in our backstage area. So yeah, and see that brother coming in now. Um, there were some real elements that Rosa laid out that is in alignment with our build and fight theory over at Cooperation Jackson. But to go back to yesterday's moment, and while we're on this concept of policing, police don't stop crime. Like they respond to an incident, or even worse, they cause damage. So just really discussing of what is an antiquated system and how do we have a radical imagination is worthwhile. I think set for a longer conversation than what we have today. But there was a statement that Rosa said that we need to start giving more thought and imagination to movement strategy and organizing versus electoral politics. And so yesterday's events is in the backdrop of what many folk will consider a win for Democrats, win for liberals. I would never say a win for the left, but a win in Georgia with essentially this concept of a blue wave that's going to transform the South, and everybody's going to vote Democrat, and we're going to become a more progressive South, and things like that. I caution folks thought in that, as I consider it, when folks, especially Black folks, rest in only the capacity of electoral politics, we are resting on the notion that Black folk can intervene in a petty bourgeois reality. And so just want to get everyone's sentiments on how does Georgia, in the backdrop of this, stoke the flame of white people's anger. How, if we rest on just the electoral capacity, are we misguided in that pursuit? So I just want to hear folks' sentiments with that. And I'll start with my brother Anthony, since he does all the good policy work anyway.
Thank you, Brother Joshua, Brother Kali. Good to see you, and everyone else. Rosa, big fan for a long time, so it's really good to share space with you, sister. And of course, Ananda, always great to see you, and great to meet you, Brother Chaunchy and Chanel. Electoral politics and a blue wave. Let's be clear about what happened in Georgia. There were many factors that led to this. This isn't necessarily something that should be relied upon to occur all the time. Raphael Warnock is going to have to run again in a year and a half. And I think that by the time that the Black folk who were called on, and I say Black folk specifically, I'm not people of color, I'm saying Black folk and Black women specifically, are basically proven that this new administration is not going to do much for them. I mean, keeping in mind that this all happened despite a very neoliberal and centrist president-elect naming essentially a racist former Obama USDA chief to his cabinet, and Tom Vilsack, and Black folk rural Black folks still came out to vote, despite what Vilsack had done under the Obama administration to Sister Shirley Sherrod. You couple that with the fact that the very next day, even before all these shenanigans happened at the People's House in D.C., before that, after Black folk had saved the country essentially to some extent in November, and then saved the Democrat in the Senate yesterday, right after we got word that like Ossoff won, Biden announced that Merrick Garland was going to be the Attorney General of the United States of America, which is someone that Mitch McConnell was recommending to lead the FBI. So I don't expect the same fervor from Black folk in the midterm elections, because I do think that voting is going to be tempered, because they're not going to see this "I will always have your back" malarkey that Biden spoke about when he was finally named the winner of the Electoral College. So that, and then the second thing is that, like, just looking at what happened after Obama, who was like, just as neoliberal as Biden, what came after that? The Tea Party, right? And massive fervor. They lost the House, they lost the Senate, the Democrats, that is, right after that. Keeping in mind, the Tea Party didn't have this charismatic leader that was like talking about populism that this new right wing has. They had Sarah Palin. These folk have Donald Trump, who's not going anywhere. He'll find a way to keep broadcasting his message. And he largely was telling people to stay home in Georgia. I mean, he went and campaigned for Loeffler and Perdue and didn't even mention their names. He was talking about the election being rigged. So there are all those factors that really led to this. But that in no way do I want to diminish the incredible grassroots organizing of Black women and Black folk. That said, I would like to see that organizing use for actual movement building and local grassroots, more cooperatives of developing that. Because I do agree with you that in a two-party system where one is neoliberal and one is like, neoliberal light, they're both rooted in white supremacy, they're both rooted in capitalism, that it doesn't make sense for either of those parties to benefit our people in the way that we need to at this point in history. And the challenge is on us, because as Brother Kali, who's a big teacher, has taught me, he just had me finish reading 2 books, How to Be Anti-Capitalist into the 21st Century. I'll get you the essay soon, brother. And then the other book, Revolutionaries to Race Leaders. We as Black folk, we have some internal work to do, because it's really hard to remove Black folk from the mentality who have been ensconced in this Democratic Party, the DNC plantation, that electoral politics doesn't matter. Because it's also a way a lot of them make their money. And we got to be honest about that. I'm not going to say any names, but even so-called radical groups that were supposed to be movement for certain lives or certain lives matter have kind of gotten a little ensconced and engulfed by the tentacles of that DNC plantation, and are doing census projects for the Democrats and having this idea that we're going to overtake the Democratic Party. Fannie Lou Hamer already proved that's not possible. They're not going to let us do it. We will hear from them every 2 and every 4 years. So what I'm saying is that so much talent in our beautiful Black, brown, indigenous communities, and to just give it up to the Democratic Party when we get a worse return on investment for our steadfast electoral loyalty than all the people that Bernie Madoff screwed over combined. How do we get that message out? And how do we, you mentioned the petit bourgeois and whatnot, how do we make our knowledge, Sister Rosa, Brother Kali, that Marxist, Maoist-like mentality accessible, like Brother Chairman Hampton did, back in the day, of course, without Rosa and Kali being assassinated. We don't want that to happen either, but we need to have these serious conversations with our people. If the Democratic Party's knocking on our folks' door, 15 minutes later, we got to be knocking on their door and making sure that they actually hear the truth. Otherwise, we're gonna be here again. And I'm telling you that the redemption that is going to be coming from the so-called right is going to make the Tea Party look like the basketball team that the Harlem Globetrotters used to beat all the time. So just to close and to say, I'm with you, and that I am not putting all of my faith in electoral politics federally, but I do think there's something to talk about locally. I think that we can recreate a series of Lowndes County freedom organizations, which was gangster, and what they were absolutely trying to do. Because Brother Kwame Ture, formerly Stokely Carmichael, Ella Baker, went into Lowndes County and was like, neither of these parties are going to help you. And you don't have to be a genius to be a coroner or a sheriff or a DA or a city council member. And if we take this over, very similar to what the model that y'all are doing in Jackson Rising and participatory democracy. We can do that on a local level and control that electoral process. But once you get to that state and national level, that's just like that wall of capitalism is is just really too hard to break. But we got to talk to our people first at the local level and let them understand that the Democrats are not going to be their salvation.
Thank you, Anthony. That was like extremely profound. I appreciate you for citing books that Kali tells us to read, and that I have Cedric Johnson's Revolutionaries to Race Leaders will definitely get us thinking about who Black folks are right now, and Bloody Lounge and the Lowndes County Freedom Organization, citing one of the many iterations of the Black Panther Party, but what profoundly really inspired Huey and Fred Hampton, and just inspired a lot of people and a lot of movement work in Lowndes County, Alabama, done by Kwame Ture and Ella Baker. And after folks, and you also cited the Mississippi Freedom Democratic Party and citing Fannie Lou Hamer, and what has been proven to Black folks over and over again is that there is little to no space for us in this mass level of federal politics, and you raising what we can do locally with participation and people's assemblies and things like that. Appreciate that. You raising that alternative. So I want to talk about what's next in our last essentially 10 minutes of this conversation. I would like to maybe bring this cadre of folks back for deeper conversation, do deeper work. Chauncey, going to definitely catch up with you more in Jackson, but want to just talk about what is not just the implications, because what I did kind of hear is this one implication of how this is going to get blamed on Black folk, and trust it's going to get blamed on Black folk, because there will be a double down of larger security measures. I was speaking with Kali yesterday, and we constantly throw around the analogy of what do we want, the iron fist or the velvet glove. The velvet glove still encapsulates the iron fist, but what I am really considering is that the velvet glove will have a pair of brass knuckles on it from now on, in really doubling down on when it's needed for our moment of protest, our moment of organizing and mobilization. There will be a large double down of security forces that I don't think people are really witnessing in this moment. But
that was already in the works, though, Joshua. I mean, that's one of the things that we got people to get people to clearly understand. And I think some of the things that I'm gonna just say that I think the wrong lessons were drawn from the events of 2020, with the way in which electoral politics wind up dominating the day over the mass mobilization, which was the largest this empire has seen since the 1930s. And how it was not only drowned that out in terms of mass attention, but also mobilization of resources from the Democratic Party, and got funneled into things that they know that they could control. But what was on the other end of that, always from the beginning, that was being offered by the Democrats, not by the Republicans. People listen carefully. They were already gearing up for, if the Floyd rebellion was going to gear up again, that they were going to put it down. That was already in the works. I want everybody to go back and study closely and carefully, particularly if you just want to look at one figure, Biden's statements from late October all the way through the beginning of December. And then if you want to get some more confirmation of that, what the clear message he put to that cause with the Black leaders that he had about what he was willing to do and what the program was going to be and what role that he expected them to play, which was, I need y'all to calm the masses down so that I don't have to bring the hammer. And if y'all cannot do that, if you cannot deliver, then I will bring the hammer. And when and if I do, I'm just giving you a bold-faced interpretation of it without all the bullshit. If I do need to do that, then y'all need to justify the appropriate use of the hammer to put down the radical elements within your own communities. Mm-hmm. Read that very carefully and understand what it was about and how it's going to be used. This is what the neoliberals are putting forward, right? And this notion around people saving the country, we ain't save a goddamn thing, right? This empire is got some strong legs and foundations. There was just a minor choice as to whether there was going to be a continuation of capitalist exploitation in the normal forms that we are accustomed to, which has the trappings of democracy, or whether they were going to institute a form of capitalist accumulation and social control that eliminated the pretenses of democracy. That's what the only choice was, right? And Trump just offered, like, look, let's just get away with all the phony ass bullshit. Put me in charge as the monarch, and I'll make sure that the markets continue to grow and you have all the resources you need to pollute the planet, to exploit the people, and we can run with this. Like, that was the clear choice that's being made. Mm-hmm. And I think we need to be mindful that in the long run, the neoliberals are actually better at dividing oppressed communities and the working class than the Republicans are. Right? We've had sharper and clearer movement because Trump gave us a clearer choice. Their job is to obscure the choice and to make us believe that some of us can benefit from the programs that they put out without trying to acknowledge the cost that it extracts upon the rest of our communities. So this whole notion that, you know, a certain faction of us, you know, save this, or a certain faction of, all you did was continue the program of exploitation and maybe allow some new rearrangement of the furniture and a new group of folks to sit at the table. But the program of extracting from the earth, the program of exploiting people, that does not change one iota. And this notion that we're going to get justice under the capitalist system, under white supremacy, under patriarchy, that is something the movement's got to get rid of in its own head and understand that we need to build up our own alternative institutions outside of that. I don't want to leave, and I'm going to shut up. I don't want to leave people without any frame of reference on what to do, because I think that some things are far more practical in terms of where we need to be headed, but they just entail us doing a lot of fucking hard work, and we can't be afraid of the work. Now, the first piece we need to deal with is we're still in the midst of a raging pandemic. Let's not forget that. People act like that just done disappeared from the scene and is out here killing, what, 2,000 or 3,000 people every day now, right? I think in LA County, they talking about every 15 seconds somebody is dying from the pandemic, mostly in Black and brown folks. So that's us. Let's be clear about who's dying from this and who needs some relief. The relief is going to come from us. And it's going to come not from some miracle cure that ain't really been tested. It's going to come from us controlling our own labor, right? And that requires us dealing with defining what is essential to us. And it may not be going to that 9 to 5 when we know that there are resources, this government control that should be at our disposal, that people ain't got to go work on these conditions. We've abstracted the position from what we can control as to what they can give, without understanding that the resources are ours for ours to see at the end of the day, not for somebody to dole out to us. But we got to build the movement to get to that point of understanding our relationship to these resources. So we need to do the mutual aid work first and foremost. That has to be married on a local level to something I think was Rosa alluded to. We have to marry that with the local food production, aiming toward food sovereignty in our communities, right? So there's an actual productive exchange, not just a mutual aid sometimes can border on charity if it's just a distribution of things that already exist, which means we have to purchase them from the market or seize them somehow. But we have to get into the other relations of actually producing the goods and services that we need to be able to distribute to our people on the basis of need, not on the basis of poverty. And that is where the third component of this program about worker self-control and worker self-organization has to come in. So a new mindset of all the folks who work in unionized places or non-unionized places, We all workers at the end of the day. The vast majority of us, we need to organize and see ourselves in some unity on that basis. Then the other pieces, we got to unleash new productive forces in our own community, right? We can't expect the capitalists to come provide the jobs for us. That's not the frame and orientation that they in this form or fashion of this age anymore. They looking for the short-term profit, not for any long-term infrastructure. So anything long-term is going to now have to come from the people. Once we get to that point, we're going to have to defend it. So we need to start thinking about self-defense right now. And then if we're going to do this in any way that's truly horizontal and egalitarian, we're going to have to organize people's democracy, and that's where your people's assemblies component comes in. That, comrades, I would argue, that's a basic 6-point program that people can start implementing anywhere in this empire right now with the folks that you have around you, without having to look for some whole bunch of abstract resources. You get your ass on the phone, call the folks that you know, start putting this together, and then building out from there.
Can I ask Brother Kali a real quick question, Joshua? Just as it pertains to energy production, only because, obviously we're on the same tip with the energy democracy and emancipation. But what we're facing right now as well, right, is not only the collapse of empire, but also the collapse of what empire's economy is tied to, which is oil and gas. As you know, brother, hundreds of thousands of jobs lost in 3 months. And just yesterday, when Trump opened up Anwar, oil companies, the big oil, they didn't even bid. They didn't even bid on the land because on the leases, because they don't have any money. So what does that mean when this collapses for our local communities, our workers, and our energy production? Because we got to heat our homes, we got to light our homes, especially in the midst of a pandemic. And how do we, based on the model that you just broke down, absorb that shock? Because even Gulf South, which you're close to, you just take that revenue out of a joint like New Orleans, right? A lot of people don't realize the football team of New Orleans, the Saints. The colors are gold and black for the oil, gold for the money that is produced from the oil. New Orleans Jazz and Heritage Festival, Shell, Aquarium, Chevron, and our service workers, who are largely our people. You know what I'm saying? So how do we absorb that shock? Because this is coming, and as you said, the fake mechanisms they're trying to use, consolidation, bankruptcy, is not working. There was an article in the New York Times. There are kids graduating with geology degrees and environmental engineering degrees, which just means there's no jobs. There's no jobs. So how do we absorb that shock?
Let me complicate it even further. Did y'all get the news this morning who the new richest person in the world is?
Elon Musk.
And what does Elon Musk do?
Renewable energy. And zero emission vehicles, space travel,
right?
Space colonization,
space mining. So it's not like there is no capitalist market or future for this orientation. They are clearly pivoting from this, and they know it. And some of the clear lessons that I'm gonna just state that we need to go back and revisit that seem to have been lost. Let's go back and let's revisit March and early April of 2020. World production came to a standstill because political leadership said shit need to stop. So nobody can argue to anybody in the world that the system is too big and too complicated for there to be immediate energy transition and shift. We learned that that's a complete lie now, right? All this stuff they've been talking about since Rio in 1992 is too complicated. Now, y'all decided if there was clear enough political reason, you would put it to the halt. What's the lesson that we need to learn from that? That shifts can happen and happen immediately. Now, what can we do on the local side? In many particularly rural areas in this country, particularly in the South and the Midwest, most of these things that so-called produce energy are technically structured as cooperatives. Most of our folks don't know that. And there's been a few organizing campaigns. A couple of people need to go back. There was a sister who led one. You're talking about praising Black women. A sister led one in the late 80s, early 2000s, early 1990s to try to democratize these institutions. And she wound up getting hammered, right? I'll try to look at some of the resources on that and put that out, because some of my memory is fading on that a little bit right now, but it's a critical lesson. I know here in Mississippi that some of the work that One Voice has been trying to lead in terms of democratizing some of these efforts. We need to draw some of those lessons, get our folks organized to, try to repossess the existing resources that exist, right? And then repurpose it, because most of these energy companies are totally against any kind of clean transition because they're still baked into the old coal, gas, and extractive industry. But if we democratize them and seize them, we can orient it in another way. We also have to start with our own local re-energy democracy initiatives. Ain't no way around it, Anthony. I mean, it's going to have trouble with a certain level of capitalization, but again, pooling resources together on a local level, we can shift a lot of that. And then look, at the end of the day, I'm gonna just argue that folks think that we're going to go deeper into the 21st century with more amplification on a mass scale of what already exists. Like, that is the wrong way to be looking at this. We're going to have to do a different type of civilization and construction, which does not rely on anything other than the sun, right? And other aspects of photosynthesis. Let's be real, and we know that that's what it's going to have to come down to if we're going to have any hope of mitigating the long-term effects of what's already baked into, our climate and our atmosphere. And let's stop playing that this is not a choice that we're not going to have to face within our own lifetime. It is, but again, why I draw up Elon Musk is so that we don't get confused, because the second lesson I would argue from 2020, oil already collapsed. And it was Trump's faction of the ruling class which was keeping it alive in the first place, right? And so part of this whole thing that you hear from the Republicans around them wanting to discipline big tech, a lot of it has to do with the elements of censorship. That's real for everybody, not just for the right. That's real. But another aspect of it is that big tech, if you look at Elon Musk, they're the folks most invested in creating new forms of energy that they can control. So there's a factional fight amongst the bourgeoisie, amongst the ruling class, over which sectors and which industries are going to continue to dominate the future. And the piece where Elon Musk is not also the energy piece that he's doing, he's also invested in digital technologies. And we have to recognize that one of the key things that is happening as a result of this pandemic is capital is learning how to reorganize work in real time. So people are thinking that we're going to go back working the way that we were working before February in the long term. That's an illusion. Automation and big tech, big data is now kind of controlling the roost and is going to shape the future here on out unless we organize something that's going to make a decisive shift in another direction.
Thank you, Khalid, for amplifying build and fight, amplifying why we need to fight and why we need to organize, and what are the elements and dimensions of what we'll have to face moving forward. Thanks, Anthony, for giving that question. But we're at time, and I want to center back to just the events of yesterday and get closing remarks from everyone of what we need to do to continue to build and fight and move towards the future. And I'll start with Brother Chauncey and then move to Chanel.
Just quickly, I want to thank everyone for the enriching and enlightening conversation. I was really inspired and informed by so much of the insights and the wisdom and the knowledge that was shared. One thing that I shared in the chat that I want to bring back to the fore again is we in Alpha, we're trying to have these kind of conversations where our political imagination gets expanded in the community. We are in a position where when we have a community forum, we tend to draw a cross section of the Black community. We get from grassroots organizers to what you would call the petite bourgeoisie in the Black community, and we bring them together because I want us to begin to recognize the diversity of thought and the possibility of what we can do if we organize. And one reason why I'm so rooted in church and so rooted in Alpha is because these are institutions in our community that could be used in the good fight. Not all the time. They're not all the time using the good fight, but they could be. And so what we're trying to do is we're trying to expand what we can do. And I'm going to be in continual constant dialogue with Brother Joshua about how we can start having more of these kinds of conversations in broader community settings here in Jackson, so as to begin to expand that political imagination, that economic imagination, that social and cultural imagination of more of our people here in the Jackson area. I just want to thank you so much for your time, and I'm looking forward to more conversations like this in general.
Yeah, I really did enjoy this, and I'm thankful for everybody that was able to make this call. I loved hearing what we need to do next, and knowing that, yeah, a lot in that. Um, One of the number one things I want to say is it is going to take a process of steps for a bulk of our folks to get there. But a lot of us got to stay fast on what we know the end goals are. If we stay very much on path with decolonization, it's not going to be easy. It's going to be a bit hard for folks. I think that's what we saw in this last year. I'll talk about why I'm laughing a little bit later. But yeah, I look forward to actually like working through these things and building. One of the number one things that we are definitely doing here in Louisville. So if folks have been like trying to figure out how to reach out and come on through. There is a lot of building here. Yes, a lot of liberal forces did try to make this a very fluffy way of inviting this notion around community policing. But yeah, we definitely are not down with the colonization of our neighborhoods anymore, and the over policing of not only our bodies but our thoughts, our passage for food, our passage for safety, and our passage for education.
Can we hear from Ananda and Rosa to close this out?
Oh, all I'll say is, well, much gratitude to everyone on this call and for some very enlightened, clear suggestions, proposals, and stances. Agree with everything that's being said. The one thing I'd add is in the discussion around the energy empires. One of the things that we anticipate the Biden administration is going to move forward on is really the lifelines that they're providing these crashing empires, and a whole host of them that we're witnessing in the climate and clean energy neoliberal policy arenas are what we're calling climate false solutions or corporate false solutions. There's a group of us, including some of our comrades that you may know, Gopal, Tom Goldtooth, and a few others who are helping cobble together. We're writing a new zine called Hoodwinked in the Hothouse that'll be important to get out to all the communities where all these false solutions are going to be planned and financed. And so just a heads up that's something that I think it would be part of, and I'd love to see, I think what Kali, Rosa, and Chanel laid out in the first few minutes, I'd love to see a national broadcast of that critique of like what is the hidden agenda of neoliberalism embedded in all this. So check. Thank you.
Same here. I'm so grateful to hear everybody because there's so much noise. For everybody who's watching, because I've been on my Facebook and Instagram live, and there are a lot of people watching. I think it's important that you all know, everybody who's watching, that the people you see here will die for the people. And part of that is really understanding what it means to be an organizer and not an activist. This is not a 9 to 5. This is embedded now in the DNA as we pass it on to the children. But I know there's a lot of fear out there. And almost 7 years ago, I was in Ferguson, like hundreds and thousands of us. Like many of us who had guns pointed at us, felt that was the moment that, oh, this is it, we could die. It broke people or it transformed people. For me, it transformed me, and I had to understand that I wasn't doing a good enough job of dealing with personal trauma, movement trauma, and then a path forward. So fear is okay. You cannot let it overcome you. So self-defense, like Harriet taught us. She always said if more people knew they were enslaved, they could be free. You can't be free without land or food. Get Farming While Black. Soul Fire Farm is in Grafton, New York, 30 minutes from us, and we're part of that community. And I am with Kwame Ture. We want power. We don't want money. We don't want fame. We don't want fortune. We don't want popularity. We want power. And power only comes from the organized masses.
Thank you, Rosa, for that reminder of what our ambition, what we set out to be, and to receive is power. And so we'll end with the all power to the people. Everyone stay safe, stay critically thinking, and we will get back with this group soon in better weather and better health, and we will continue to fight and to build and fight together. So thank you all for joining us, and we'll check for this moment and continue to fight and be out there. See y'all.
Thank you, Joshua. Peace, everybody.